So I'm Dr. Stefani Pautz Stephenson. I'm the Senior Director of Educator Community Partnerships at Digital Promise. And Digital Promise is a global nonprofit where we are working together to expand opportunity for every learner. And that means closing digital learning gaps. But the digital divide, keeps evolving. So first we had a divide in access. We had the students who had access and the students who did not. Then we had a gap in powerful use. Students who had opportunities to use technology in powerful ways and those that only had the access. And in the past year, we've heard about AI creating a third digital divide, where some students have access to this powerful AI-enabled technology and a teacher to help them understand how to use it and to learn about the AI itself versus those who have access only. So at Digital Promise, we believe that cross-sector partnerships can help prevent this third digital divide. And that's why I am so excited to have the panel here today that we have. Next to me, I have Mr. Jason Green, who is the co-CEO and co-founder of Learning Innovation Catalyst.
Thank you.
We have Dr. Nneka McGee, former CAO at San Benito CISD in Texas. And Dr. Pati Ruiz, Senior Director of Emerging Technologies at Digital Promise. So Pati, I'd like to start with you. Can you set the stage for us a bit more about the current framing of the digital divide?
Yes, so the Office of EdTech recently released the 2024 National EdTech Plan, where they outline the divide, Stephanie, that you've already identified earlier. So we have the use divide, right? And all of these divides need to be addressed, and there's an opportunity for EdTech companies and developers to begin addressing these divides so that all learners can have access to these technologies. The digital use divide is about addressing how to improve how students use technology. The design divide is about expanding opportunities and helping educators understand how to leverage these tools for better learning experiences for their students and their communities. And then we have the access divide, which is one that we talk about a lot at Digital Promise, and that includes access to connectivity, access to devices, access to the digital content that students need, access to the health, safety, access to citizenship. And so all of these divides are things that we think about with our partners, including CAST, who developed Universal Design for Learning. And we try to guide EdTech companies to ensure that they're developing products that are accessible to everyone, because we know that when we develop products that are accessible, we benefit everyone. So that's what we're hoping to do at Digital Promise.
That's great, thank you. And Nneka, a question for you. Over the past few years, you've not only been working as a school system leader, you also just finished your dissertation on, woo, on the.
I don't know whether to cry still or yay, no.
And your dissertation was on the experiences of K-12 educators implementing AI. So congratulations.
Thank you.
And can you share a little bit of your insights, both from your observations as a school leader and from your dissertation?
Sure. The most interesting insight that I found, and like I said, I was talking about this yesterday, still being in my feelings about who teachers want to hear from when they're learning. And it's not district people, right? They want to hear from the teacher down the hall, their colleague. And I think that's important when we think about, the digital divide, because if they don't have access, right? If teachers don't have access, how does that filter down to our students? The other interesting tidbit from my research had to deal with the issue of access. And I find this very interesting, and I talk about it because in a district such as my own and other participants, you can have one-to-one. You can have every student, particularly with ESSER funds, we have one-to-one technology. However, if the tools that we are using do not reflect or provide outputs that don't reflect the student population that's being addressed, is that really access? Yeah. Are we still exacerbating that digital divide? And so that was just another part of particularly the bias that can be inherent in some of the AI systems that are being built. That was also an interesting part of the research.
Very interesting, very interesting. And kind of, along the lines of PD, Jason, LINC has a long history of success as a professional learning company. That's actually how you and I first met. But you have recently entered the AI space with a new tool, Your Way.
Yeah.
So what did you notice when you entered the AI space?
Yeah, so it's a really good question. And part of what we found is what AI can't be is a way for us to do the same old practices faster. If that's what it ends up becoming, then we've actually missed the boat. And so what's interesting with us about AI and PD is PD has always been kind of separated from the classroom. It's you go to a workshop, you go to a thing that's out there, but then what do you do once you actually get to the point of implementation? And so what AI has created is a way for PD to actually be right at the point of implementation. So that teacher who's trying to differentiate their classroom better, who's trying to do station rotation, now has an opportunity right on the spot to actually try that practice with more support. So it's a very exciting development in PD, and the way that we're thinking about this is, how can we actually bring more efficacy to the classroom by supporting teachers? Now, there's one other point that I want to make, though, around equity from a developer lens. So we hear a lot about AI and equity and the biases in AI, right? That's talked about all the time. It's widely understood. But what we sometimes forget is that wasn't a foregone conclusion. AI and bias is there because society is biased, but it's also there because the people who were present during the first iterations of LLMs, it wasn't a diverse group. So people who were flagging the alarm, like Joy Bolamwini and others, were not in the room to say, hey folks, we have a burgeoning issue in how we're creating these LLMs. So if you think about it, the LLMs are biased because there wasn't diversity. The next phase is developers. So you could probably count on one or two hands the number of developers of AI that are Black or that are truly or Black and brown. If there's also a lack of diversity there, then what we now have is a downstream issue of LLMs being biased, developers not also having diverse sets of people, and then what does that then create for our classrooms? So to your point, Nneka, if our students are not reflected in these tools, if the people developing them are not at the table in numbers, then we have to ask the question, who is developing for, in many cases, the students in the greatest need? So that's where we have to think about equity from the standpoint of both developers, but also as it relates to access and deployment.
Got it. Nneka, do you want to add to that? Why does this matter? What's the impact for our students, both current and future?
Well, you're going to have a world of AI haves and a world of AI have-nots. And we can't afford that for our society. We'll have a group of students who will be relegated to certain levels of society based on an issue that we have the power to address today.
Yep.
And that is one of the things that has kept me up at night, really, because in my previous district, we had city schools where, people were more middle class. We had country schools that straddled the border of Mexico. And so you could see the stark difference in what had happened to these communities. And to be in a position where, am I in a position where 5 years down the line, 10 years down the line, the kids, which we call the country schools, don't have the same opportunities that the kids at the city schools? Who's to blame for that? That would be us. And so I think right now we have to continue to pay attention to and to put action toward ensuring that the systems that we put in place, again, remember what I said, if I am inputting scientists, or if I'm inputting, I want to learn more information about this or learn more information about that, and the outputs are not reflective of me, I do not consider that access. I consider that to be still the divide, regardless of what you call that. And they will feel like, we've all seen it. We've seen kids that say, well, I'm not going to be a scientist because I've never seen a scientist who looks like me. I don't want to do AI because there's nothing in the AI system that looks like me, that relates to me and what I deal with on a daily basis. We can address that today, and it's so necessary. And so I'm happy to continue to advocate for digital equity and then to be surrounded by organizations and people who are thinking about this work and taking action.
Absolutely agree. And and I think that's one of the most troublesome pieces here is that this is not new. This is not an AI problem that has arisen. Pati, I know you've done some research on the implications of not centering or sometimes even including historically and systematically excluded voices. Do you want to talk about your research there?
Yes, thank you, Stephanie. And I really appreciate what Jason said earlier about these issues being present because of who was at the design tables. My dissertation work focused on historically and systematically excluded voices, specifically Black and Latinx women in engineering programs. This was back in 2017. I myself graduated as a computer scientist in 2003 and did not go into industry. When I went back to do my doctoral studies, I was super curious to find out what happened to me, why I didn't go into tech. I ended up going to education, love the route that I chose, love how it worked out for me. But I could have also been at those design tables, and I wasn't. What I found out in 2017 is that these issues continue to persist, and we need to actively dismantle these systems that don't allow for participation of historically and systematically excluded learners. And when I look at the NETP report, which you should all check out, Office of Educational Technology, and think about these divides that we need to address, like Nneka said, this is urgent. We need to do this now, and we can work together with developers and work together with researchers, with practitioners, and that's what we're hoping to do. It's what we need to do in order to begin to address these issues and ensure that the students who are in classrooms now are getting the background and content knowledge that they need to be designers of these tools and to be at the design tables and develop products that work for them and work for their communities.
Yeah, and that's spot on. This is where we believe that the cross-sector partnerships can really have an impact and play a major role. Yesterday we led a session around research practice industry partnerships, which is where a learning scientist sits at the table with developers, with practitioners, and they share a research goal, but they also each have their own individual value proposition so that they're taking something back, whether it's the educator taking new instructional design practices back to their classroom, the EdTech developer having a better product. That's where we really see a lot of power coming from. And Nneka, you participated in something like this with us at Digital Promise, the Vital Prize Challenge, which was a year-long experience, a multi-stage competition where EdTech entrepreneurs were, as part of the program, paired with practitioner mentors who gave them authentic insights into the classroom. So can you talk a little bit about that experience and how that has shaped your thinking about the importance of that partnership?
Well, the first part is learning more about the EdTech space and the drive. Like, I'm a pretty driven person, but to see people at early stage development, I was like, whoa.
Yeah.
But to see that passion and to see the need to make a difference. In the case of the company that I was dealing with, it forced them in Digital Promise, just in terms of the thinking, like you said, the developer cap, to maybe not at first thinking about the wider picture. And so as they got further along in their development, they said, you know what? We're surrounded by indigenous communities. Let's go out and tap into these indigenous communities and get their input to help us make our product better. That would not have happened unless there were intentional actions and organizations, again, putting things in place that can make that happen. And from my side, to be able to have those conversations and have them think through, my position was not to tell an EdTech company what to do. That's not my strength. My strength was to give them the educator lens that would say, that's not gonna work. Our teachers aren't gonna go for that. Have you thought about this type of modification and what impact that would have? And I'm gonna speak to the other thing with that is that I just am passionate about this, and if there's a message I could send when it comes to the equity pieces and coming from the lens of district leadership, I was first a teacher. Teachers have to be in the loop of the processes and deployment and development of these systems.
Yes.
How can you go through a whole development cycle and not have a teacher who's on the front line with these kids every day? I just, because what I see on my end that has to make the decisions about investing in these products, and then we get the usage reports that are saying teachers are not using these products, which means that kids are not using these products, and then we're having to make decisions to end support of products, that's impacting people down the line. So it was such a great experience to have that lens from the EdTech side, to be able to provide that input, and then to see that growth of their intentionality.
That's incredible to hear, and I love that we're getting snaps and yahoos from the other side of the audience for including educators in the development process. It seems like a no-brainer.
Yeah.
Jason,
Yeah.
why aren't more companies doing this?
Yeah, so what should be a no-brainer isn't, for a number of reasons. So I want to kind of take you all back, at least from our vantage point, in how we even came to this step of now developing an AI tool. We spent 10 years understanding teacher development, the research behind it, and then working in classrooms directly with teachers and principals to understand what are the challenges, right? Now, here's the issue that we have when you have a product coming to market, is usually that product has been funded by a VC or some other interest that actually has a desire for ROI. The challenge there is there's a time lapse on that. There's a time crunch that you now have to bring a product to market very quickly. What that doesn't allow for is really in-depth research. We took the opposite approach. We said, we're going to start by learning the market, what are the challenges, and then developing from there. But the problem with that is, then a lot of the VCs might say, well, you're a services company, so we're not going to fund the technology. So it really does create a structural challenge in what it looks like to be very thoughtful about product development and doing this kind of research. Within that, we also have to understand that the people, and I want to come back to this, the people who are at the table during development are very important. I'm developing from the standpoint of a Black male in the US, which means I lived what it looks like to have a K-12 experience that didn't represent me. So what that means is every single thing and decision that we make in my company is from the direct understanding of what it means to be a learner in a classroom that doesn't actually look like you or represent you. So right now, and you can actually share the slide. So right now, and we think about this approach to development is, we first think about safety. And really this idea of anything we bring to market should be something that actually is safe for our students. The next thing is access. Like Nneka said, do all students have access to a tool or product or AI tools that actually work for them? The next thing is efficacy, and efficacy isn't just about learner-centered, it's also about culturally responsive education. It's also about, do I see myself in these tools? And then the last thing, and this is where I think the real bridge to, are we going to get this right, is if we're honest, the first wave of EdTech did not have the results that we all wanted, if we're honest. So between 2010 and 2015, when there was all this buzz around new tools that were going to transform learning, it didn't happen. And part of why it didn't happen is because so many of the technology didn't speak to our teachers and our students. So the last piece that I want to talk about here is empowerment. As a result of us being in these classrooms, our students should actually be empowered as learners. So one of the things that we've been doing at LINC and now with Your Way is building tools focused on empowerment. So if you go to that, you'll actually see a tool for how to build a lesson plan around culturally responsive teaching, around how to build a lesson plan around student agency, around how to actually think about yourself as an instructional designer that actually is putting students at the center of their learning. And so when it comes to this idea of research and also practice, there are structural barriers that actually prevent that from happening. But I do believe that as a technology company, as a developer, we have to be the ones to actually get past those.
I appreciate you sharing that. And most of the research practice industry partnership work that we do begins with a developer. It's a developer coming to Digital Promise and saying, we want to do this right, just like you've shared. But Pati, I'd be interested in hearing your perspective on this. How do we, and to kind of bring us full circle as we're down to under our last 10 minutes here, how can we ensure that we're not creating different gaps or widening gaps through the partnerships that we create?
I think one of the important things is what you brought up around efficacy. As researchers, we know that these products work for some students under some contexts some of the time, right? And what our goal is to understand what those parameters are and to be able to work with developers so that we can ensure that these products are working in different contexts, right? Every school district is different. Every classroom is different. The learners that you're trying to reach have different needs. And we need to be nimble enough to be able to be responsive and to take a look at the research and respond to that research in those efficacy studies. At Digital Promise, we just launched our ESSA-aligned product certifications. Every Student Succeeds Act has tiers of evidence, right? And we're working with developers to better understand how they're conducting studies to ensure that their products are meeting the needs of their students and the communities that they work in. And so efficacy studies is one way, but we also need to be listening to the needs of learners, understanding the needs of teachers, and developing with those in mind. It might not always benefit from a financial perspective, but it's important to serve the needs of the learners that are in the classrooms, because that's our goal in education, right? Meeting the needs of students and doing that in a way that benefits all learners, which takes a lot of work, right?
Yeah.
Jason knows.
Oh, yeah.
So in our last couple of minutes, we'll start with you, Jason. What is, just to close this out, I'm gonna ask each one of our panelists to share in like 1 minute, what's your key takeaway from our discussion today? What's your next step?
So my key takeaway in our discussion here is we have to be very present to the representation across all levels of this. From the very beginning, there were issues that were missed, and they were missed because people weren't at the table who needed to be. If we don't correct that, then all that becomes is a cascading effect down the line. And that's every point. That's from the LLMs to developers to deployment to ultimately the access towards an empowering learning experience. So for me, the big takeaway is, how do we make sure that all of us take the responsibility of ensuring that the people are at the table that actually represent the students, the communities that we're ultimately serving? That's mine.
Thank you. Nneka.
And I have to definitely piggyback on what Jason said. Representation is intentional. It is an intentional act. And we have the power to make sure that representation occurs. If you're sitting at a table and it just looks like all one voice, you have the power to say, wait a minute. And is there something we can add here? There's something seems to be missing and so there's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing wrong with advocacy, because if we don't make the investment on the front end, what does the back end look like? I don't think that's a world any of us, first of all, it's not a world that's realistic, because outside, it looks a little bit different. And so again, when you're at those tables and you don't see a representation that looks like society, we have to have the power to act and to speak up and not be afraid of the consequence of now, because the consequence of future is too great. Many of us are adults, we've had our success, we've made it in our respective ways. Our kids have one shot at a K-12 education, and we can empower them to be successful, and why not give them the chance that all of us have had to benefit from? Education is the equalizer. And let's keep moving forward and make sure that we're giving that equalizer to our students.
Yes, Nneka, absolutely. Both you and Jason bring up excellent points. For me, it's about our responsibility. We have a responsibility to address the divides that were outlined in the National EdTech Plan and ensure that all learners have access to emerging technologies. And for me, I think a lot about our responsibility to our teachers and their professional learning journeys, and how we might be able to provide them with the opportunities that they need in order to be able to meet the needs of their students and their communities. We're noticing that the community members, family members are coming to teachers asking for guidance. We need to prepare our teachers, and it's our responsibility to do that. We're coming out with more guidance on AI literacy and how we might support teachers in their professional learning journeys to bring AI into the curriculum. And so I encourage all of you to check out our forthcoming AI literacy white paper that comes out May 16th. But it's our responsibility to ensure that all learners have access, and that means training teachers and ensuring that they have the professional learning needs met that they need.
Awesome, thank you all. And I would say that my key takeaway is the time is now. You know, I think we've been having these conversations for far too long. But let's use the AI revolution as the lever to make these systemic changes in education. Because I don't want to sit up here with you all 5 years from now having this same conversation and things haven't changed. Now's the time, let's change it.
There you go. Thank you.
Thank you all for being here. If you scan the QR code, that will take you to some resources as well as how you can connect with each of us.